Welcome back to the Bridge to Medicine podcast. I'm Dr. Laquita Jones, pediatric oncologist and physician scientist. And stay tuned. In episode number 2, I'm telling you a little bit more about my backstory so you can understand who it is that you're going to be hearing from during this podcast. I look forward to sharing more. See you in a moment. Okay, so yes, I'm Dr. Laquita Jones, as I mentioned in the intro, pediatric oncologist and physician scientist. And today, I wanted to give you an opportunity just to hear about my story so that you can understand who I am, how I got to this point. I won't share everything. And actually, in the first episode, I did talk about how being in front of this camera and talking like this is a little bit uncomfortable to me. And I just think you should know that from a standpoint of relatability. Just because I'm in front of the camera doesn't mean that it's something that is like comes natural to me or is easy per se. There have actually been some challenges with getting this podcast recorded today, but I'm hoping that I can pull this together and that it'll all be beneficial to you. So I hope you're doing well. I hope that whenever you are seeing this video that it can be a source of encouragement to you. And before we get started, I just wanted to also encourage you to subscribe to the YouTube page, Dr. Laquita Jones, and then also to find me on socials. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, and I'll try to remember to remind you at the end, but follow me on those platforms as well. I'll share more there in addition to on the YouTube page. The podcast will primarily be on the YouTube page and then also across the different streaming platforms, but I'll also share little tidbits and clips on social media as well, in addition to other things. Sometimes I share about my personal life and my stories, like on Instagram, for example. So it'll be podcast plus on social media. So so I would love to hear from you in the comments. So first and foremost, I would love to know, where are you in your journey? So are you a student? If so, are you in high school? Are you in middle school? Are you in college? Like, are you a pre-med student? Are you in a different major and you're planning to maybe switch into pre-med? Are you a medical student, resident, fellow, attending physician, etc., nursing student? Whatever the case may be, I would love to hear from you. And like I said, the purpose of today is just to give you a little bit of background to me, because I know that my story is inherent to me. I know my story well, but all of you don't necessarily know my story. So I wanted to take some time to share that with you before I get into sort of the meat of the podcast. I hope you can see me okay. I'm kind of still figuring out my setup. So if it looks different from week to week, bear with me. I am planning to switch over to my camera at some point. Right now, I'm just recording this on my computer, but I am not exactly sure how to record on my camera. I tried and it didn't seem to work. So here we are back on the computer. Anyways, it gives you an idea that it's not perfect even for me as a doctor. I don't have it all figured out. So yeah, anyway, okay, a little bit more of my backstory. So yes, I grew up in the Midwest. I was raised in a single parent home, and in that home I was raised up as the youngest of 3. And I do have a younger half sibling that I don't really know, but I was raised as the youngest. So we'll just say that. In addition to that, I was the first one in my family to go to college and to become a doctor. So for me, the story goes that I wanted to become a doctor at a very young age. Actually, you know, it's common for people to ask little kids, like, oh, you know, when they're in kindergarten, first grade, you know, and beyond nowadays, you know, even into high school, I would imagine people will ask the question of, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do when you grow up? And for me, I always knew I wanted to become a doctor. That was one of the things. It wasn't the only thing at first. So at first the list was doctor, lawyer, teacher, or ballerina. And I didn't really come from an affluent background. I'll just put it like that. I did come up in an environment of poverty, unfortunately. So, you know, the ballerina thing didn't really stick. Not to say that people who don't come from money can't have dance lessons and things like that, but it just didn't stick. Like, it was just, I think I liked the tutus and the pink and all that at a young age. And, you know, I appreciated being able to teach people stuff. Sorry, there's something in my eye. I appreciated being able to teach people stuff. And so I think that's why the teacher thing was in there. And then the lawyer thing, I'm not exactly sure where that came from, but that fell off probably second after ballerina, because I knew I didn't want to argue for a living. So, you know, what I think is really cool about being a doctor is that I still can do things like teaching. Like, even with this podcast, this is meant to be informative. It's not just meant to be me sitting here talking in front of this camera and talking about myself. No, actually, I prefer not to just talk about myself the whole time. I may have to pause this to get this out of my eye, whatever this is. Of course, it would happen as soon as I start recording, pardon me, but you can see some of the imperfections. But yeah, so nevertheless, I wanted to become a doctor from a young age. I always loved math and science. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. I don't know what that was about. I did not have anything in my eye before I started recording. So maybe this is an important episode. Maybe that's why these things are happening. Anyway, I always loved math and science, going to school. Math and science were some of my strongest subjects in grade school and high school, etc. Me personally, I did start going to college in high school. So I started college in 10th grade, and I was in a program where the goal was for us to graduate high school with our associate's degrees. I did not graduate with my associate's degree, but I did graduate with a lot of credits that allowed me to finish college early. So I finished college in about 3.5 years, or I'm sorry, not 3.5. That's not true. My goal was to finish in 2.5, but I finished in 3 years instead of the typical 4, or I guess for some 5 or whatever. But I majored in biology and pre-med, and yeah, I applied to medical school while I was in college. And part of the reason why I didn't graduate with my associate's degree was because when I was in school, in high school, I dealt with very much time away from school because I was sick. I was in the hospital a lot and things like that. And, perhaps I can share more on that some other time. But that did not stop after high school. It continued on, unfortunately. But that did impact my timing of graduating as early as I wanted to. But in college, yeah, like I said, was pre-med, majored in biology. I considered chemistry, but, I really loved chemistry, but I just didn't like it enough to major in it. I felt like the biology was my stronger suit, so to speak, to the stronger path for me. My least favorite subject was molecular biology. And I tell you that because guess what? Now my lab focuses a lot on molecular biology. So it's just really interesting how things work out. You never know. So just keep that in mind as you go along. You may have something that you really dislike and it may become the very thing that you focus on. So yeah, cell biology, molecular biology, that's what my lab focuses on a lot. Now that I have a laboratory of my own, which I'll talk about later on. So yeah, in college, I did some research. I think I studied like algae. It was interesting. I remember putting on the water boots and pants or whatever to go out into the, I don't know what it was, stream, lake, whatever it was, to do algae research. That was really interesting just to get some exposure to research. But I didn't think it would be like the major aspect of my career at all at that time. So yeah, when I was getting ready to work towards graduation and just getting further along in my college career, I was deciding if I wanted to apply to MD or DO schools, and then also deciding, well, do I actually want to do this med school thing or not? I did actually apply for an anesthesiologist assistant program because I actually was interested in anesthesia. And if I remember correctly, I think I interviewed there and everything. Yeah, I think I want to say I interviewed. But I ended up applying to medical school, obviously, after taking the MCAT and things like that, which I did take. I want to say maybe I took it twice. I have to think back about this now that I'm talking to you guys about this. I want to say I took the MCAT twice. And I decided to apply mainly to DO schools, and it was because of my experience as a patient. Not that there's anything wrong with MDs. It was just that having had that experience of being on, medications and going through surgeries and things like that, I said, okay, well, let me pursue this route because I figure if I can also learn about how the body can heal itself or how we can do these different manipulations in order to help the body heal itself, why not go that route? So that's why I focused on only DO schools. And what happened was when I applied to med school that year, apparently the wait list or the class was too full. So I was actually on the wait list. And, I remember I talked to one of the leaders there and I was basically told that it was a very strong chance that I was going to get in and things like that, blah, 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 just based on my credentials and whatever and how the interview went. And I'm like, okay, great. That sounds amazing. And I did not get in. The class was full. One of my friends, she actually was amongst one of the people who was asked to defer a year because the class was too full. So basically what that meant for me was, okay, you can either keep applying to schools or you can go this route and do a post-bac program. So I did a post-bac program for 1 year. And I was very upset because, here I am, I graduated. I was 20, I had just turned 21. And I was like, well, my plan, of course, is to graduate early. Like, what? Who wants to be graduating at the normal age? So that's not what happened. I got into the post-bac program. It actually was a blessing in disguise, to be honest. To this day, I still have friends from that program, literally, like long-term friends. And in addition to that, I learned how to study. So backing up a little bit, like I said, I grew up in a single parent home, and my school that I went to a predominantly black high school, and the college that I went to was, I would say, predominantly, or a large number of black people there. I don't know if I would call it predominantly. It wasn't an HBCU, although I did consider an HBCU. And maybe we can talk about that some other time, because I do wonder how that would have turned out if I would have gone to an HBCU. But I didn't go to an HBCU, but there were a lot of black people there. Okay. And I'm just sharing that for context, because I realized as I went kind of along the way, there were less and less people that looked like me. When I got to medical school, there were some black people, but there were not as many. When I got into residency in my class, we had a class of like 30 to 40. I can't remember with you. If you include pediatrics and med peds, I was the only one in the pediatrics class. And then when I did fellowship, I was the only one. And since that time, I've been the only one, even as a pediatric oncologist attending physician. So it's been interesting. That being said, yeah, I graduated college, was planning to get into medical school, graduate early, become a doctor earlier than normal age or whatever. But I didn't. I got into the post-bac program, and it was a blessing because I met friends there that are still friends to this day, not as close as I used to be to them, but they're still friends. I've, been in one of my friends' weddings, and the other one, I've had other friends who I've attended their weddings, or one of my closest friends is actually someone who I was a mentor to her, even though she's a year older than I am. I was a mentor to her when she was in the post-bac program, because she took some time off between college and medical school, and then she ended up doing post-bac as well, and then went into medical school. She's one of my closest friends to this day. So that was a blessing. But even beyond that, the other part that was really a blessing to me was that I didn't realize I didn't know how to study. I don't know about you, but I wasn't taught how to do certain things. And I learned along the way that I had to learn things kind of on the go, either by way of asking, by way of learning the hard way, by making mistakes, through trial and error, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that I didn't realize, and even some of my colleagues, many of my colleagues who, like, I know I had one of my good friends, she went to an HBCU, and this is not about HBCUs not equipping you to study, so don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that I'm just sharing we have like slightly different paths. She went to an HBCU for undergrad. I did not. Where I went was, I would say, a predominantly white institution, but there were a lot of black people there. And for me, having been the first one in my family to go to college, and I wasn't forced to go to college. I wasn't forced to become a doctor. I know some people have that story where it's like that some people's parents may say, oh, you have to become a doctor. That was not my story. In fact, I would say it was quite challenging for me, because when I was planning to go to college, I had to figure out so much in terms of, how do I do this? I didn't have anyone like holding my hand to tell me, Laquita, this is how you do this. No, I had to figure it out, and like, hey mom, can you sign this form? Like literally like that, so it's just different. It's just different. So, but my friend I was mentioning with the HBCU thing, like she who went to an HBCU, and, part of me wishes that I had, but, I don't know. Like the Lord has a plan. So everything works together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. But I remember we would talk about how we didn't really know how to study, and I think the post-bac program really stretched me to force me to learn how to study. It was a very intensive program. We took basically, I think all or mostly graduate level courses. And, yeah, I also had exposure to immunology, which I did not take in college myself. So that was a blessing, because I still to this day have to know things about immunology for sure, especially as an oncologist. The immune system is so important when it comes to cancer. But the immune system is important in general. And that was one of my favorite subjects. And I was like, oh my gosh, I actually have an immunobiology textbook back there on my bookshelf. I don't think you can see it in this frame. But yeah, so pardon me, I'm going to take a sip of water, but I had to learn how to study. And that was one of the benefits of being in the post-bac program. So the other thing is that, like I mentioned, I was not someone who came from a family of affluence and, money, wealth, and things like that. So I know a lot of my colleagues, my classmates, they, had their family members paying their whatever bills for them, whether it was like car insurance, phone bill, etc., etc. I didn't have that. So I actually, although it's not normally allowed for that particular program that I did at the time, it wasn't allowed for us to work because it was a full-time gig to go to school, and it was quite demanding. But because I couldn't afford to live off of the little bit of money that we were getting from the like I think I had gotten a loan or whatever. That was my first time having a loan because I went to college on a full ride, but I had a loan that I had taken out for the post-bac program, and the little bit of money I had, I just couldn't survive. And it wasn't like I was living in any kind of fancy way. No, I had like 3 roommates, the shared house, all this stuff, so I had to get approval to get a job. I wanted to get a job in order to survive, and I had to get approval to do that. So that meant I had to have a strong GPA. So I had a 4.0 at the time, and I graduated with nearly a 4.0 by the grace of God, despite the fact that I worked part-time, unlike my colleagues. So it was very demanding, very hard. Yeah, I remember I would have so many moments of sadness, to be honest, because I was like, man, they're going to whatever Mexican place in town to go get dinner, and I can't even afford to go to get dinner. This is crazy. Like, I just remember being on the phone with my family multiple times with my mom and just saying how sad I was. Like, man, I can't even afford to go to Applebee's or go to this Mexican restaurant or whatever, like it was just so sad, to think about even. But yeah, so from that point, I went directly into the medical school program. So basically what happens is you had to have a certain GPA, and then you matriculate into the medical school program. And with that also came like mentorship. And that was my first time being a mentor. And I think maybe my first time officially having a mentor as well. So I had a mentor when I was in the post-bac program. And once I matriculated into being a first-year medical student, I was a mentor to my friend that I mentioned. And yeah, that was my first foray into mentorship. So that was interesting. But yeah, medical school. And then I believe, during the beginning of medical school or before, I knew that I loved kids. I've always loved kids. I literally have always loved kids since I was a child. Like, I loved children. So I knew I wanted to do something in pediatrics, but I kind of went back and forth about what I wanted to do as far as like if I wanted to do cardiology, anesthesia, emergency medicine, of course, hematology and oncology, gen peds. And essentially what happened was I did a rotation at a hospital in the Midwest as a 3rd-year student, or as a 4th-year student, excuse me, when you get to do more of your electives. And I did a rotation on pediatric hematology and oncology, and that's when I was like, yep, I like this. I really appreciate the children. They're so amazing. Just being able to see them, they're just different. Kids are just different, like you will know once you go into a hospital and take care of adults versus children, it's just a different experience. And it's not that it's necessarily easy, it's just different. So when I was rotating through oncology, the pediatric oncology floor, and seeing that these kids were getting chemo in the morning and then running around the floor playing video games, like super happy, it was just like they were not fazed about what was going on. So that was something that really kind of drew me to the field, in addition to the relationships with the patients and families. In addition to, I just thought it was interesting to learn about the things related to oncology. I remember when I first learned about vincristine, which is a microtubule inhibitor. I learned about that first year of medical school, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And I had kind of an interest in pharmacology, which is part of why I was interested in anesthesia. So all that together was like why I was really interested in pediatric hem-onc. So then I transitioned into, of course, my residency in pediatrics. So I had to apply, of course, and I did a pediatric residency, which is a 3-year program. And then in the midst of that, at the time when I matched into fellowship, it was a 2nd-year match. So I had to decide by the end of my 1st year of residency. And I was like, I don't know about this, I don't know. So like, I think I was interviewing, I can't remember the exact dates, but I want to say it was like the decision was made by winter, spring of my 2nd year where I was going to be going. I want to say, I can remember February of my 2nd year was like when I was wrapping up my interviews, I think. So I want to say the match was in like March or something like that of my 2nd year. So basically that means I had to apply early. And I remember at the end of my first year, I had already rotated through a few things, including many things, obviously, including pediatric hemonc. At the time, it was a rotation that we had to do as interns, but then you could also do it as a senior if you wanted to. And I did that. In addition to that, I rotated outpatient. And when I did the outpatient rotation and was able to ask around and ask questions just like about the lifestyle and things like that, I got a chance to learn from others that they found it to be really fulfilling and things like that. So I decided that's what I wanted to apply for, and I did. And I can share more about my matching story some other time, because that's the whole thing in and of itself, how I ended up matching where I did. And yeah, I did my fellowship. It's a 3-year fellowship, was a 3-year fellowship, and that is changing. But was a 3-year fellowship. I'm talking about like nationwide is changing in terms of like if it's fellowships are being reduced down to 2 years and things like that. But that was not the case when I was a fellow. I did a 3-year fellowship and I did a 3-year residency and 4 years of medical school. So, yeah, basically first year fellowship was all clinical. So all in the hospital and some outpatient time, some like clinic. I had clinic every week, of course. And then we had some rotations through clinic, like all outpatient and rotating on hematology, oncology. Where I am, we have a big program. So it's divided up: solid tumor / brain tumor, leukemia, lymphoma. And then there's also a BMT, which is totally separate. And essentially, during my first year, one of my patients that I took care of, who I love dearly, died of AML, or acute myeloid leukemia, and that's what made me interested in that. I knew I wanted to focus on blood cancers when I came into fellowship. Oh, I forgot to mention, during residency, I did do research in hematology. I wanted to do research in leukemia, but I couldn't find a project to do. And I actually started a research project as a medical student that I was able to carry throughout my residency. That was totally unrelated, but it was like asthma OMT project. So I guess I was kind of showing glimmers of being a researcher at the time, but I was not planning to do it like this. So I did some research as a medical student. I got my first grant. Then I started a project up in my first year of residency and carried that through until the end and published that when I was a first year fellow. Did a hematology research project as well. That was, I think, second and third year of residency, I want to say. And then published that as well during my first year. And then knew I wanted to study AML during my first year of fellowship. And I was trying to do clinical research, but then I couldn't find a project. And also to fill my time enough. And I was like getting ready to apply for the master's program and everything to do clinical research. Met with my mentor, and after getting advice from multiple people, made a decision to join the lab. And I was shocked myself. I remember him talking to me about CRISPR-Cas9, which, if you know anything about that, essentially it has to do with like gene editing for the purposes of like technology and things like that, to understand how different things work, and even has been used, of course, for sickle cell and things like that, which is not my focus, obviously, but just to give you an example. I remember I was like so confused, like, what are you talking about? I've never heard of that. I don't know what that is. But I decided to join the lab, and kind of long story short, the rest is history. So I'm still shocked a little bit myself, but I started my lab. Technically, I think it was 4 years ago now. So once I finished my fellowship, I actually stayed on to become faculty where I trained. And also I decided to pursue the physician scientist track. I had not even heard of physician scientist prior to that. I didn't realize the person I was working with in residency, who was a great mentor to me, I didn't realize she was a physician scientist. And what? It was just like, I didn't know. So I remember the first time my mentor called me a scientist, and I was like, I'm not, what? No. So yeah, that's a long story. I'm happy to do a podcast episode on that. But I got my first grant at the end of my second year, going into my third year of fellowship, and then the rest is history. And now I have a lab. And I'm thankful. It is a rewarding and fulfilling thing. I'm happy to talk sometime about, what has it been like to be an oncologist. As I shared earlier, I kind of alluded to that, going along the way in medical school, there were less Black people. It's not all about race. I'm just sharing my experience. In residency, I was the only one in my class. And then in fellowship, I was also the only one in my class. And then I've not seen many Black fellows come through. I think it's just that there are not that many that go into the field as a whole. Like, we represent a small percentage of the field as a whole. And then also, apparently the first Black oncologist where I am. So it's been interesting coming from being that little girl who came up in a single parent home, first one in her family to go to college and go to medical school and all that. So yes, it's been a journey. So I'm obviously just giving you the Cliff's Notes, and there have been many things that have been difficult along the way, lots of lessons learned, lots of mentorship. So I guess if I had to leave you with one thing, because I'm going to wrap this up because we're already at about, I think, almost 25-30 minutes. If I had to leave you with one thing, I would encourage you to ask questions. So I understand what it's like to be the first and the only. Okay? I understand what it's like to have a different background than the people around you. I get it. That's been my story along most of the way, I would say. Yeah, I understand a lot of things. And I would say that number one, I'm where I am today by the grace of God. He has been very faithful to me. I'm happy to share more about my journey with faith as well. I'm a Christian, as I shared in the first episode. I love Jesus. I love my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Yeah, I'm a daughter of the Most High. And mentorship has also been a very important thing to me, which is part of my heart for this. Part of the reason why I'm doing this podcast, why I'm starting a mentorship program, is because I want to help you guys. I know I've had a lot of people reach out to me over the years with different questions and wanting mentorship and things like that. And it's a lot to do. But also, I want to give back in the ways that I can. And this is the podcast is a free way to do that. The mentorship will be a paid program. I have not launched that yet, but it will be coming. But I would like to walk alongside you in the way that I can to help equip you. But my advice to you is to ask questions. Okay? I remember one of the reasons why I didn't share this early on, but it wasn't the reason, but one of the inspirations to me was seeing other Black doctors who looked like me. And again, it's not a lot. I mean, my mentors have been of all races, ethnicities. So be clear on what I'm saying. Don't hear what I'm not saying, hear what I am saying. What I am saying is my mentors look like a variety of different types of people. Okay. And also sometimes seeing someone who looks like you can really be the thing that pushes you when you say, well, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I remember I had those moments where I'm like, I don't know about this. This is too hard. This is a bit much. Okay. I'm in medical school. I'm a resident, whatever. This is a bit much. And I'm going through A, B, C, D, E, F, G. This is a bit much. And I remember I could hold on to, well, but if Dr. Cook did it, I can do it. That was my pediatrician, a Black woman. Love her dearly. Still to this day, love her. And there have been many people who have been an inspiration in a way to me along the way. But I also had to be willing to ask questions because I didn't know everything. I just told you when I went to college, I had to figure that thing out. I didn't have anyone holding my hand to say, do this, do that. Same thing for medical school. I'm like calling around, asking questions, trying to look on the websites and blah, blah, blah. And technology wasn't what it is today back then, so ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be ashamed to ask. Don't be ashamed of your story. Do your research in terms of trying to understand what it takes to do this, to get into this profession. So the nugget for today is ask questions. And again, I want to hear from you in the comments. Where are you in your journey? Are you an undergraduate student, high schooler, middle schooler? Are you a parent who wants your child to go into medicine? Feel free to share that. Subscribe to the YouTube. Also follow me on socials. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. It's all Dr. Laquita Jones, same name across the platforms. And I'll share more there. Okay? But I look forward to seeing you next time. And bear with me as I get this going. Like I told you last time. I want to post at a certain cadence. I'm not saying how often yet. Because I want to be a woman of my word. And I'm still figuring out how to do this. Again, figuring this thing out as I go. But yeah, I hope this was helpful. I hope that you will be encouraged by my story. I hope it wasn't too yappy or whatever, but hopefully hearing a little bit of my story gives you a picture into who you're hearing from. And I hope it's relatable to you. And I hope that you would be encouraged. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you next time. And God bless you. I'll see you next time. All right. Bye-bye.